Welcome to today's episode of the Ready Writer Podcast, where members of the Southern Christian Writers Conference share information, inspiration, and encouragement.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Ready Writer Podcast. We're so excited to have you listening this week where we interviewed David Sloan, the co-founder of the Southern Christian Writers Conference. We hope you enjoy listening to him and gaining information from him. Before we get started with the interview, I do want to talk about some of the events we have going on within the Southern Christian Writers Conference coming up shortly. First off, the SCWC Notable Book Award finalists have been announced, and the winners will be announced on Saturday, February 8th at 3 p.m. While we have only invited finalists and a family member of the finalists to come to our in-person award ceremony, you will all be able to watch as well. We will be sharing the video on our Facebook group and on our YouTube page. So make sure to be looking out for that and be looking out to figure out who our winners were. For that, we have some really great books that were entered and that are finalists. Next up, the Breeze Hill Writing Retreat is going to be held on Saturday, March 22nd. It's been a while since we've had one of these, and we're really excited to bring it back. The leader for this year's will be Valerie Lussey, who is an award-winning Southern fiction author and also a former travel editor from Southern Living. The retreat is only open to 12 participants, so it's a very cozy, immersive, personal workshop. You'll get instructional sessions, but you'll also just have time to write in a really beautiful place. You have to apply to be chosen for this since it's such a small group. The deadline for application is February 20th, and then we're going to announce immediately who the 12 participants will be. I'm going to link the application form in the description of the video if you're watching on YouTube, and in the description of the video if you're listening on Spotify. If you'd like to be published in our upcoming spring issue of Anchored, which is our digital magazine, the deadline to submit your true personal essays, fictional, short stories, or poems is February 10th, and our theme is planting seeds. Use your creativity to fit that submission, and then you can email your submissions to us at scwritersconference@gmail.com. I will also put that in the description box of all of our videos and podcast episodes on Spotify. That issue is going to come out on March 5th. And finally, we'd love for you to subscribe to our new home on Substack, also called The Ready Writer. It provides you with several articles a week on the craft of writing and also a lot of encouragement and interviews with writers and other professionals in publishing. We also have a really fun writing challenge that's going to take place there on Substack from February 7th to February 14th. That's only available to subscribers. So the link to that will also be in our description. All right, so that's everything that's going on in the Writers' Conference soon, and we hope that you will continue to interact with us throughout all of those things. I hope you submit all of your pieces for our magazine. I hope that you sign up to try to come to the Breeze Hill Retreat. It's going to be so fun. And yeah, I hope you guys just continue to enjoy what we're doing in the Writers' Conference, and we just want to continue being a place where you have opportunities to get published, to get good information from professionals in the field. That's what we've got going on. And now, to hear from David Sloan, the co-founder of the Writers' Conference, here is the interview.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ready Writer Podcast. And today we have a treat for you. We're going to be talking with one of the founders of the Southern Christian Writers Conference. And so we're here with David Sloan, and we are going to talk today on the topic, how to have a more powerful writing style. And we think that Dad, I'm going to call him Dad, he's my dad. Dad is perfectly qualified to talk about this because over the years as professor of journalism, he's a professor emeritus at the University of Alabama, author of about 30 books, and also editor of numerous books. We think we counted up to about 70 books when you look at all the different iterations of things he's done for them. One thing he's very interested in is quality of writing, and we've talked about this in the Southern Christian Writers Conference before, that we think it's very important as Christians that we are being professional, we're doing a good job, we're trying to do really the best job that we can in our writing and in our projects. And so I feel like Dad is an expert on this because of all the years, decades really, of experience and time he has in all really aspects of the writing and publishing process. Dad is actually the author of a new kind of instructional book, or it's going to be a short book that is on this topic. It's going to be along with several other short books that we're going to be doing through the SCWC on different aspects of the writing process. But his is called 30 Days to a More Powerful Writing Style. And he gave me the table of contents here, and there are 30. There's going to be 30 of them, right? But I was looking at some of the first ones that are going to be in it, and I thought we could just talk a little bit about a couple of these, and you could tell us why they're important.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything you want to say before we get started?
Huh.
Dad did found the SCWC in 1991
I think so.
with my mom,
Yeah.
Joanne,
Well,
and so
and I should mention actually with you.
and with me.
Yeah.
I was very young.
Yeah, you were right out of college.
I was right out of college.
Yeah.
That's right. So
And really, it was you and I.
yeah,
Well, I shouldn't say that because once Mom was convinced,
she jumped on board.
yeah.
Right. But it
Yeah.
was, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been doing this with our group for decades
For a
now.
long time.
And then you've been writing and editing for a lot longer than that. So, okay. So in looking at this, the first one that sticks out to me is thematic unity
Right.
in our structure.
Yeah.
So what do you mean when you're saying that?
Well, let me say, kind of as a preface to that, I see if you try to understand kind of in a scholarly way, or
Yeah.
almost a theoretical way, you might say. I hate to say that, but because most writers are not interested in theory.
Right.
Yeah. But, if you said the theory of writing,
Yeah.
I think there are two big categories
Okay.
of devices or approaches that account for good writing,
Okay.
or if you don't get them, account for bad writing.
Right.
One is unity.
hmm
The other would be intensity.
Okay.
Okay. Unity normally would relate to structure.
Right.
Intensity would relate more to style.
Right.
Like word usage.
Sure.
Okay. So thematic unity, I say, is the most important. Even to start with, more important than intensity, than writing style.
Right.
Because if you don't have let's say a story built around a central theme,
Right.
which you might think of as the conclusion or the main idea.
Right.
If it's a nonfiction article.
Thesis statement they used to
That's
say
right.
back in the day.
That's
yeah.
right. Yeah.
In school.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
So the theme is that main point.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So everything that goes into a story has to be related to that theme.
Right.
Okay. So you're not going to go off chasing rabbits.
Yes.
Okay. You're not going to bring in ideas
That don't
aren't
relate to
related.
that.
That's right.
Right.
Even a sentence
Mm.
could be wrong.
It
or-
should have a purpose for being
That's
there.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Every detail, when you
Uh-huh.
think about it, should be related to the theme.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
there's no point
Mm-mm.
in bringing in something that's not
Right.
related to the theme. So you've got to know what the theme is
Mhm.
before you begin.
Right.
I think some writers think, well, I'm going to find the theme as I write. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's not.
You need to
That's
think
not
this
it.
through before
That's
you ever
right.
start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My advice has always been before you begin writing, you've got to know what your theme is. And you can't say, well, I've got this idea, let me start writing, and then I'll figure out the theme as I go
Mhm.
on. One of the best disciplines you can have is before you start writing, write down, not as a part of the story,
Right.
but just as a guiding principle for you. Write down the theme in a
Mhm.
complete sentence.
Right.
And this is an important exercise
Yeah.
anyone
Yes.
would benefit from. You have to be able to write it down in a complete sentence, because what you
Mhm.
think, what will happen sometimes is you think you know the theme, but then when
then-
you try to state it, you
really
you
don't.
can't do it.
Yeah.
You can't come up with a sentence.
Right.
And so that's a good principle.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say everyone should do it. And when
Yeah.
you're trying to write that complete sentence, don't say, complete a sentence has a subject and a verb in it.
Yes.
And sometimes has an object.
Right.
So a complete sentence can't be going swimming.
Right.
Because that's
not a complete sentence.
No, that's a topic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you think, okay, well, I've got to write a complete sentence. How can I do? Oh, here's a complete sentence.
Going swimming.
The topic is going swimming.
Yeah. But going swimming was one of the most important memories of my childhood, or something like that. That would be more of it, or not?
That could be.
Yeah.
Depending upon, obviously,
what you're trying to do with what you're writing.
But imagine if you, or if I came up with the idea of going swimming.
Yeah.
And that's all I have. Well, what is it about going swimming?
Right. Yes.
So, going swimming could have a lot of different things.
Right.
I couldn't stand going swimming. Or,
right. I hate going swimming. I'll never go swimming again.
Yeah. Or when I was 13, I was going swimming, and this happened to me.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So anyway, you have to know what
the main
theme
point
is.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So once you have your theme, then you have to structure your story.
Right.
So that all the parts fit together. So your beginning has to be thematic.
Right.
So let's say we're going to...
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
When we're talking about having this is for all types of writing. Okay. So this would qualify for an article that we wrote, a newspaper column, a letter to the editor, a poem, a novel, even a book. Okay. Short story. So any type of writing.
Magazine article.
Right.
Novel.
Okay.
Now, you do hear people, writers say, well, I have this idea and I'll start writing off on this theme. And some may be able to do that.
There might be some novelists who are able to do that or something. But
how many novelists, though, have you read about who said, well, I got halfway through
and then
my
realized,
novel so I started from scratch.
Right.
So anyway, there's a theme there. Even though some writers couldn't tell you that, hey, I have this approach to writing where I come up with my theme.
But they probably actually do.
Yeah. I think even these very accomplished writers who say they can't tell you how they write, they actually know how they write, but they've never just thought about it. Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay, so you got to have the theme.
Okay,
extremely important.
Right.
I'll add to this a story in a piece of writing to be effective. To work, can't have two themes.
Okay.
You've got to have one theme.
Yeah.
You may have some side.
Even a book with many chapters still has a theme.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because all of those chapters
have to go together.
relate to this main idea.
Right.
Okay, so that is important. But I would say some writers who, even though they might be told this, they ignore it because they have this idea and they want to write, and coming up with a statement of theme is too difficult for them.
Right.
And so they just jump in, and as a result, their story
falls apart, or it,
But anyway, you've got to have one theme, not two. So then all the details need to go in. If you're having a dialogue or a conversation, you can't have people just wandering off in your dialogue unrelated.
Right.
Even in a long novel, and you're going to have perhaps a lot of characters and a lot of dialogues. Even those individual dialogues still need to
write
to the theme.
Yeah.
You might have an interesting story, but if it doesn't fit, unless you just
doesn't move the story forward.
Right.
Okay.
So anyway, thematic unity. Now I'll add a little bit to this. You can break down then parts of a story into paragraphs and sentences.
Right.
And sentences we don't often think of as having a thematic unity, but they actually are built around a point. Paragraphs are easier to understand because you go back to elementary school when you were first writing your first essays or whatever it was. Your teacher would say, this is the way you write a paragraph. You have a topical sentence and then you...
Right.
Now, I would say for most writers, not having thematic unity in paragraphs is not a problem that you come across.
Yeah.
But Cheryl, for you, people like you and me who've written for newspapers,
Right.
it's a serious problem.
You are trained to do that.
Yeah, not to have long blocks of type.
Yep.
Instead, just with no particular transition between them. But in normal writing, not in journalism, but normal writing, you certainly don't want to take the journalism approach. So overall, theoretically here, you would write a paragraph on this one idea, you'd begin with it, and then you would develop it in the paragraph. But as you know, in most writing today, you don't want these long paragraphs.
No. Right.
So in a short story, for example, you might have paragraphs that are one or two sentences, one after another.
Right.
So that's really done just as a matter of, how we say, typographic practice, because you don't want this long block of gray type.
Right.
So you have this long paragraph essentially, and it's broken into a lot of short parts.
Right.
But you could run them all together, and it would be a thematic paragraph.
Right.
I said one other thing about thematic structure, which you had already hinted at, and that is that as you're organizing your story, your beginning needs to be thematic. Right. And it should be a variety of devices. But it can't just be irrelevant. Right. You might have a joke, let's say, and it's very funny, and you think, hey, this is a way to get the reader into the story. Well, that joke needs to be about the thing, relate to the thing. And then you, I guess it varies with authors, but many know what the conclusion is going to be before they begin the story. Whereas
to me, the conclusion is hard to write, I think.
I know.
So,
and sometimes you know where your story is going, and you kind of come, as you're writing it, you come up with, hey, this is would be a neat way to end it. But some people know, I've read about novelists who will say they write the final paragraph before they ever begin the story.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, all parts
go together.
Need to work together.
Right.
Then, as I mentioned, I would say the other big idea that's important in writing after unity is intensity.
Right.
And intensity then gets into words.
All those literary devices
whether you're going to have internal rhyme or
I guess it's how we would say something is well written. If it's a good story, it's probably the intensity that we're noticing.
I kind of wonder. I guess what I started to say. The body of the story, but that's actually related to theme. I think you'd put that under theme, how you develop the plot, for example.
Right.
Intensity is those just individual units, words that you put in and the way you handle them.
Yeah.
Now, people, there's some writers who are what we think of as literary. It just comes naturally to them. Most of us aren't.
Right. I wish.
Most of us are ordinary writers if you get right down to it. And I would say for people, especially those who are starting out, but this would be true for anyone, but I'd say the ones who need to pay particular attention are the young ones. I'd say I'd start with clarity.
Okay.
What you say has to be understandable to your reader on the first reading.
Yes.
Now, this wouldn't apply to like poetry sometimes, where you have to interpret and think about it. But, most readers of novels or short stories or magazine articles or newspaper articles, they don't go into this story with the idea, okay, I've got to ponder this. I've got to think about this and figure the writer's going to have a hidden
Mhm.
meaning here in each sentence.
Yeah.
And I've got to understand
Right.
what that
Yeah.
philosophy is
Right.
of the writer.
Right.
So readers of most writing, no
Mhm.
matter what it is, whether it's a popular novel
Right.
or whether it's a popular novel or a magazine order, they're just reading it.
Yeah.
They're not saying, hey,
we're not analyzing it
uh-huh.
and breaking it apart. We're probably reading it either for entertainment or to learn something.
That's right. And for both of them,
Right.
you have to be clear.
You have to be clear.
Your writing has to be clear.
Right.
So when you write, you have to remember you're writing not for yourself.
Mhm.
You're
Right.
writing
For
for
the
a reader out
reader.
there.
Right.
And you have to recognize to begin with, you know much more about the subject you're writing about than the reader, most readers will.
Right.
And you have a lot of ideas in your brain up there that's associated with every sentence that you write.
Right.
So you can write one sentence and you may have these memories or recollections or things that you learned. But you've got to force yourself, you've got to make yourself realize that you know more, you understand more, you comprehend more, you have more associations than your reader has. And so every word you put in there has to be understandable by the reader without the reader having to think about it. I'll give you a real quick example. When I was 15, I went swimming in this pool back in the pasture. Now, do you know what I'm thinking?
No.
I mean, to me, I remember this exactly. And there's this whole episode.
Right.
But if that's all I tell you,
I don't.
you think, what?
I don't know the context of it. I don't know. Right. Yeah.
And that goes for every word.
Right.
Okay, so if you get down to the sentence level, I would say as you write, you obviously are able to think pretty fast and put words together. But as you're writing sentence, if for any reason you hesitate, you need to think, okay, do I need to explain this more clearly? And then certainly when you finish writing, when you've got your first draft, even if it's in pretty good shape, you need to go back and read what you've written, thinking about every word, not just scanning through the sentence.
Yeah.
Back when I was 15, I went swimming in a pool in the pasture. I presume that sentence is clear enough.
Yes.
But you need to go through and read every sentence word by word, thinking about the word, and asking yourself, does that make sense?
Does it make sense?
And if it doesn't, you need to rewrite it.
I mean, I have read articles before and I've thought, why are we even including that information? And so it does happen. Things get to print sometimes where it's not unified and it's not clear, and or I'm just confused. What does that mean? I need more explanation. Yeah,
you can read, this is getting back to thematic unity, but you can be reading, say, a short article and there's a paragraph and then you what's this?
What is that? Right.
And you can even think, okay, the story is going to go this direction, and you find out a
true.
Page later, it's never even. So that's understanding what you're writing about.
Right.
Then, so I would say clarity really is the first thing that you need to consider with intensity.
Right.
If it's not clear, it's not going to be intense.
No, exactly.
You're going to be lost.
Right.
The reader's going to be lost, so it loses the effect that it might have.
Yeah, right.
I mentioned here related to intensity, again, this kind of comes directly out of clarity. But you've got to have your mechanics of language right. Because if you don't, if you make errors in punctuation or spelling or grammar or whatever it might be, not only will that probably hurt the clarity, but it can also confuse the reader.
Right.
You will hear these readers who will say, well, forget about the rules of grammar. Okay, those who can forget about the rules
Yeah.
of grammar are the ones who know them to start with.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
And so if you, to some extent, it's true that if you, as a good writer, if
Mhm.
you really understand the rules, then you know sometimes you can violate the rule, but
Right.
still
Right.
you're not
Yeah.
confusing the reader.
Well, nothing stops me in my tracks when I'm reading something more than when I see a mistake in something basic,
Mhm.
punctuation,
Yeah,
grammar,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, spelling.
spelling.
Let me
Right.
tell you a little anecdote. Maybe I've told you this
Uh-huh.
before, but when I was a senior in college, majoring in journalism, I was editor of a local weekly newspaper,
Right.
which was a pretty good paper for a
Yeah.
weekly. We had about 24 pages with a sports section and
Right.
editorials and so forth. And each week I wrote a column,
Mhm.
which would be pretty long.
Yeah.
Being 21 and knowing everything, each week I would tell the readers about this problem, and
Here's
the
how to solve it.
solution.
Okay.
Mhm. So I wrote this column that was about that long and about that wide,
Yeah.
and was particularly fine and insightful
Yes.
and put together.
Yeah.
You know,
It was clear and intense, and yes.
And so
Do it.
my older brother was a graduate student in English. You
Uh-huh.
remember Gary?
Yes.
And so I saw him the next day after the paper came out and said, "Gary, did you read my column?" You know, thinking
Yes.
this was a pretty good column.
Oh no.
I said, "Gary, did you read this column?" My column. He said, "Yeah, and you misspelled inconsequential."
Oh my goodness.
And I thought,
wow.
my goodness, after I put all this time in it, that's the one thing he
noticed.
Yeah.
Didn't notice the great points
That's right.
you were making.
Yeah.
He noticed that. Yeah.
But you know, that point has stuck with me.
I bet. Yeah.
That, and he added to it, "David, if they can't trust you to spell correctly, how do you think they'll trust you when you deal with big issues or
Right.
ideas?"
Right. Yeah, that's good.
And so if you have any readers who know the rules, and if you make mistakes,
Right.
that is going to ruin it for them.
For sure.
Because they'll be thinking about, well, he can't even spell.
Right.
Or he mispunctuated
Right.
here or something.
Yeah.
So, on mechanical correctness, in some ways you almost have to know the rules before you start writing, because if you don't know the rules, you won't know when you've made a mistake.
Right.
You
Exactly.
don't know if that you should have put a comma in there and you didn't.
Right.
Or you should have had a conjunction and you didn't.
Right.
I mean, you just don't know these.
Right.
If you don't know them, you don't know
right.
you don't know them.
Right.
So you need to be sure you get your mechanics correct. That'd be spelling. Punctual commas particularly give a problem.
Yes.
Because I'll give you one example, which a lot. How many times? This is This is a question rather than my example.
Yeah.
How many times have you been reading, let's say, an article or maybe something online, and it gives a date, let's say January 25, 1965 was the day.
Right.
Comma has to go after the year if you have the day of the month.
Right.
Same thing if you have the city, comma, state, you've got to put a comma after the state.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, here's an example. The problem you find frequently is misuse of commas with what are known as restrictive and non-restrictive, or essentially non-essential words and phrases. I get the terms confused because it seems like they should be opposite. But a non-restrictive is when a word such as brother or wife or husband, probably wife or husband, we better here, can refer to only one person, unless you're a bigamist. If you're not a bigamist, you'd have to say my wife, comma, Joanne.
Yes, right.
Comma. If you said my wife Joanne, that is, if for someone who knows the rules, that's saying out of my group of wives,
Yes. Right. Yes.
my wife Joanne.
Right.
Okay. So you'd have to say my husband, comma, Gary, comma.
Right.
You would say, since you have only one
Mhm.
brother, my brother, comma, Christopher,
Mhm.
comma, because all that word in the
Right.
comma is doing is identifying that
Yeah.
one person.
Right.
Whereas your three daughters,
Mm-hmm.
let's say if Sydney were writing my sister McKenna,
Mm-hmm.
if she said my sister, comma, McKenna, she would be saying she has one sister.
Right.
Whereas if she said my sister
Sister.
McKenna,
Yeah. Yeah.
that means she has more than one sister.
Right.
But it's amazing how many people don't know that.
Yeah.
So if you were writing my husband Gary without the
Mm-hmm.
commas,
Right.
a reader would have to assume
Yes.
logically that either you've been married before,
Right.
or
I have
Gary
multiple
was an earlier husband,
husbands.
or you're married to at least two husbands. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you've got a few. I'll just mention this one other thing. You've got to be careful with commas so that you don't misuse them and just create an error of understanding, which often you can.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, again, the purpose of grammar is for communication.
Right.
That is clear.
It's clear. Right. Right.
So what if, I come up with something else here. This first one here. What would be the difference here if Melville began Moby Dick?
Yeah.
He begins it, call me Ishmael.
Yes.
What if he put a comma and then said, call me
Ishmael? Be like, call me Alabama.
That's right. So what if someone,
right,
you wouldn't find this, but what, you could find the similar, but in what if someone was to say, let's eat, Mom.
Right, exactly. Let's eat, Mom. We don't need to be eating our parents.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so anyway, this book that I'm doing doesn't go into as much detail as this. But anyways, so what I'm doing is starting with unity, and then going through the principles related to that, and then about 20 chapters, 25 chapters related to style. And each one will be about 2 pages.
Right. Yeah.
And I have been working in quotations from famous writers related to this, because I figure the readers might believe them, not me.
Right. Well, I think it'll be a really valuable tool for sure.
Yeah, I'm also putting exercises at the end of the chapter.
Right.
With the idea really that if someone will take one each day and will do the exercise
in 30 days, you will
should,
have improved your style for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I can't wait to read it. And we hope that helped you. I'm sure it probably reminded you of some rules you might need to go brush up on, I feel like. But thanks, Dad.
I enjoy doing it.
And we will see you again next time.
We hope you enjoyed that interview with David Sloan. Remember, we will be back in 2 weeks with our next episode of the Ready Writer podcast. And in that one, we will be speaking with some finalists of the Notable Book Awards. So we hope that you will listen to us then, and thank you so much for listening to this one.